Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the J&J Pod, featuring a conversation between John Laxmi and John Laxmi. The title of this week's episode, Addicts Anonymous.
Hi, everyone. It's John Laxmi here with my father, John Laxmi. We are back on the J&J Pod with episode 8. Now, for some context, we are a podcast, but we are also a family pod. Right? It's my father, this is me. And I want to give you a bit of an intro of who I am, and then my father can introduce himself and why we do this, right? We've created a few episodes so far covering a range of topics from mental health to finance, relationships, the economy, history, etc. So you should tune in and you can find our information in the bio here. But my background, I am the founder of Kismet, right? And Kismet, as you may know, comes from the word destiny or fate. And my company is really a mission to help people connect more deeply, right? Loneliness is a problem I'm sure you have faced before in your life. I've definitely faced it in my life. And my company's moniker is the science of connection meets the lost art of love, right? Because so much of how we relate is communication, understanding the parties that we're dealing with, but a large part of it is also science. And there's a ton of data, a lot of empirical studies that can help us be better at dealing with people, dealing with ourselves, conflict resolution, and at the best level, falling in love. Before this, I'd worked at the CIA's investment arm looking into human performance technologies. I've done stints at the White House, JP Morgan, NASA, AI startups, a whole slew of different things, which is why we can talk on a range of topics. You should follow me on TikTok or Instagram. My handle, you can find me through my name. It just passed 100,000 followers. I'm one of the fastest growing influencers that's in the space if you're having trouble with your relationships. And, we're all here to get advice from you, feedback from you all, and to provide whatever insights we may have. So I will pass it off to my father now, who can introduce himself.
Thank you, Jonathan. Congratulations, by the way, on your hitting
Thanks.
the 100,000 followers mark on Kismet. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm John Laxmi, the father who lives in Atlanta, Georgia now. Last few years, we moved to Atlanta. I've lived in the New York area for about 35 years, working in the finance field, and then prior to that in government in West Virginia. And being a retired person now, I focus on issues relating to my family, friends, and of course my son and daughter and their friends and others. And so a number of these podcasts have dealt with issues that are important to all of us individually. And this particular topic that we're going to talk about today should be of interest to a large number of people. It's a widely discussed topic, and it's just beginning to be understood. And it's called Addicts Anonymous is what we call this episode. So let's kick it off, Jonathan.
Yeah. So, we want to start with maybe, I would say it shouldn't be a contrarian point, but maybe it's something that's hard for us to admit, right? Like my father said, Addicts Anonymous, right? You know the moniker Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It's a 12-step program that has had a lot of success for a lot of people, but in all forms, every human to some extent is an addict, right? At a basic level, we're addicted to food, we're addicted to oxygen, right? The obvious things that you don't even think of, but we all have some idiosyncrasies, some fixations, and there are good addictions and there are bad addictions, right? People like to use the cliche of it's bad to be obsessed with something, it's bad to be, addicted to something, but I think that there is a line between the two, and there's some things that are good. So I wanted to first start with you, Dad. What do you think is this line between what is a good addiction and a bad addiction? Or is it that, no, if you're addicted to something, sorry, life's all about moderation. You shouldn't be addicted to anything.
That's a great question. I wouldn't say that all addictions are bad. There are addictions and there are addictions. And what we should really be aware of is that addictions probably come from our routines and our habits.
Yeah.
And then eventually some of them really grow on us.
Sure.
If you ask my family circle and friends, they would say I'm an addict to, I read a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm addicted to reading. Is it good or bad? Well, depends. If I'm constantly reading on my laptop or my phone all the time and I'm not really attending to my family or my health, well, that's bad. But if I'm just a voracious reader, enjoying it and maintaining my health and balance in my life, that's probably okay.
Sure.
And also addictions have grown over time, it seems to me.
Yeah.
My time in my younger days, most of the time, addictions meant people would refer to addiction to alcohol,
Sure.
maybe gambling.
Yeah.
But today we have so many things available to us that
True.
we can be addicted to social media.
Yeah.
Kids can be addicted to their devices, and little kids have phones.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to really distinguish between good addictions and bad addictions, and also
Sure.
really, when does addiction become a problem? Addiction
Okay.
becomes a problem, I think, when it becomes a repetitive behavior, which may provide us short term some relief from some pain or suffering or some pleasure, but over the long term really becomes a problem by depriving us of other things in life. Our health, our happiness really suffers as a result of that behavior. That, I think, is generally a better definition of addiction, as
Sure.
opposed to really calling anything
Yeah.
and trying to really resolve it. We need to be really focused on what it is that we are trying to deal with.
Sure.
And so we should probably really deal with really, have we understood this well enough now? Do we have solutions? And what are the various approaches to this? Or what have you
Yeah.
found?
Yeah. No. So I think at least my space focuses a lot on relationships. And honestly, they've shown that the neurochemistry around a breakup, for example, right? Certain areas in the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the ventral tegmental area, your dopamine circuitry, all of these things parallel almost what an addict experiences, right? A person who's having withdrawal from cocaine, the same neurocircuitry is being activated when you're going through a breakup. So I think one point that you and I discussed, which is important, everyone knows someone who's addicted, let's say, to alcohol. Sure, in New York City, I mean, I would say almost everyone's kind of an alcoholic and they think it's just normal drinking habits. But that a lot of times people say things like, oh, why don't you just stop? Right. And I think people focus a lot on the symptoms, just thinking that, hey, these habits are things that come, this is something that we can't change. But a lot of times there's a deeper reason, right? And this is where a lot of therapy currently focuses on, which is that what is the underlying root for these addictive processes? Now, some of them are going to be basic, just biology, right? We're addicted to sunshine. We like music. It releases dopamine. Some addictions, like you said, are healthy, and life is about competing priorities, right? You're going to want to take care of your wife or your friend. You're also going to go to work. You want to have to work out. And like you said, Dad, that when you're starting to notice that you're feeling pain, right? Because you're not prioritizing something which is causing you sadness in light of a different priority, that's usually when the brain turns on and says, I might be doing something wrong. So I wanted to, before we'll get into this, and I have a lot to say on this, but I want to ask you, where is this line between an addiction being a disease of its own, right? Because when you drink alcohol, for example, it actually changed the neurocircuitry of your brain, versus, hey, if we just solve the root problem, then you'll stop drinking. If you're in a happy home, you'll stop drinking. Does it take a life of its own, or is it purely just a symptom of underlying problems?
Well, based on my anecdotal experiences, I think addictions are generally mostly symptom of really deeper underlying trauma or some problems. Taking drinking as an example, for example, people go to a bar and drink not necessarily because they like the taste of the alcohol. Some of them taste good. Most alcohol tastes bitter. It's because there's a bartender who is willing to listen to what you are talking about, or somebody else sitting next to you who is also at the bar. She wants to talk, you want to talk, or people are willing to listen to each other. Whereas at their workplaces, they may not have somebody to listen to when they have some issues, or at home they may not have somebody to listen to for their issues. So it seems to me that very often society, and we label the addiction as either a disease. We outlaw many of them. We've outlawed drugs and made them illegal. And people call them bad habits. And so by simply putting labels on the actual addiction itself, we're not really focusing on the person who's addicted and what is driving them to the addiction. So what we really need to really focus on is go back holistically, look at the context of a specific person, how they became addicted to something that is causing them negative consequences. So there are three things here. One, the addiction behavior itself, which you said could be a problem because there's chemical imbalances. I'm talking about the causes that precede it. And then the consequences of addiction, what happens as a result of it. How do
Sure.
we deal with the consequences to themselves as well as to the workplace, the family, and people around them?
So I'd want to challenge that point a bit, because I agree that there is a lot of context and causes that can result in these symptoms of doing behaviors that can then become addictive patterns. And a lot of times it's not just having someone to listen to you, et cetera, right? It can be access to an environment. It could be social reinforcement that everyone does this. It could be that everyone has an iPhone and these are the apps on my phone, right? And then it almost unconsciously creates these addictive patterns. But I think that there's nuance. If we just say an addiction is only a symptom or primarily a symptom, it's important that point you kind of skirted around, right? That chemical imbalance is such a large part of it, right? It takes a life of its own, meaning if someone has cancer and then they cope with it by smoking cigarettes a ton, they're going to develop an actual nicotine addiction, right? Nicotine becomes a problem of its own. It's not just, hey, if we got rid of cancer, they'd stop smoking, right? That's not true. So I think that to truly tackle, and I think there's some approaches which we'll talk about which target addiction, right? To tackle it, it's I won't give a percentage, but it's important to, yes, understand the causes, right? The negative thought patterns, the compulsive behavior that can result in addiction, but to not just empathize, but understand the biochemistry behind addiction. Addiction has a life of its own in the brain. It compromises your executive function. They've shown biochemically there is a process for addiction, right? The first stage of the process is called increased incentive salience, which means that people have cognitive function to say, oh, I don't like, this is not good for me. But when they're exposed saliently to an incentive, there's an alcohol bottle in front of them, right? They're triggered by being at a party and they see a person that they shouldn't talk to, but they want to, boom, the circuitry kicks in. The next thing that happens is decreased brain reward, okay, and increased stress. So essentially there's preoccupation anxiety where your brain is reinforcing. It's like eating sugar every day and apple stops tasting sweet. You need a higher high. It's decreasing the amount of dopamine you can feel. So you constantly got to feel something, but you're less motivated to act because you're looking for that salient kind of trigger. And the third thing that happens is compromised executive function, right? Your prefrontal cortex, which is our higher order thinking relative to chimpanzees and apes, right? The Homo sapiens. You literally cannot think straight. Think about being in love, right? When you see someone that you're attracted to, when you're scared at a job interview, public speaking, your brain is under pressure. Your sympathetic nervous system is compromised. And if we deny those effects and we just try to give the results of getting rid of the causes, we won't have someone's ability to even reflect on their causes if they're in a compromised state. So I think that's important to differentiate. But in your experiences talking to people who have shown these addictive patterns, how do you go about counseling them, right? Where does it start? Do they need someone to talk to? Do you need to get rid of let's talk about alcohol, right? That's a common one. Do you need to get rid of the alcohol that's at their place? Like, how do you go about dealing with it?
Well, my personal experience really is one of the earliest experiences, is a sad one. One of my very, very close friends died about 15 years ago at a young age in his 50s.
Yeah.
And he died of cirrhosis of the liver, which is generally known to be caused by alcoholism. I knew that he was drinking, but I didn't. He was a very close friend. I knew he was drinking. I didn't know how much he was drinking and how much damage it was causing to himself and his health. And after his death, I began to really think a lot more about it and explore this, and started actually talking to some additional people that I knew were beginning to have symptoms of drinking too much and so forth. And I generally found a few common characteristics among the small number of people that I've dealt with. Number one is that, as I said, there are some preceding issues that drive them to drinking, because drinking other substances are a form of escape. I'm sure there's some biological process that make it possible for us to momentarily, at least temporarily, forget about the topic that's bothering us and escape from it. And then the reality doesn't go away. So, next day the reality hits again. And as you mentioned, they go through maybe a period of short remorse and some reprimanding themselves. A couple of days later, you see a bottle of a drink, or they run into some friends. You're back at it again.
100%.
So what I've generally found is that in the cases that I've observed, that once they have some outlet to other than just this escape from drinking,
Sure.
to vent their issues and deal with their issues.
Okay. Yep.
They're difficult to come by because most people won't admit that they have any addiction. Most
Yep.
people most of us won't admit that we have a problem. We
Sure.
only display our achievements and
Sure.
what we are proud about. Most people don't discuss that we got laid off or other problems that we are going through.
Yep.
So the first, I think, issue is to really make sure that people are able to seek help or talk to someone.
Sure. No, I think and there's also this packaging of sadness that occurs nowadays. It's almost cool to have a mental health condition, right? It's a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, I drink all the time, and the way I'm wasted." Yeah, oh yeah, my therapist said this, etc. And I'm like, I understand that, but underlying that is pain, right? And it's okay to be sad, right? We can't deny what we feel. What matters is how we react to our feelings. So I agree with you that I think that people are scared to be vulnerable, right? A lot of times people don't even know that they're addicted to something, right?
Yeah.
It almost takes an outside party to shake that up. Fortunately, there are a ton of resources now where you can catch these patterns. The point is, in your life right now, if you're not happy, there's something you're addicted to, even if it's to laziness, right? If it's to porn, it can be anything, but something's not making you addicted to things that get you a happy life, right? And on average, like they say, depression's a condition that also affects the brain, etc. But they say if you can go for a week-long vacation to the Bahamas or Bermuda and you're happy there, that doesn't mean you're actually depressed. It means your life sucks, right? So we can change that, right? If you're happy on vacation, you're not happy in your life, it means we just got to change your life. When you bring up that point, I think there's this almost counterintuitive thought experiment that I talked to you about, which is that do a thought experiment like this, which is that when people, let's say you have to go a mile, right? You have to travel a mile. A lot of times people will be like, okay, I'm going to walk. Okay. Let's say that takes you 15 minutes. Then when you got to go 2 miles, they're like, you know what? I'm going to drive. Okay. And then you get there in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So this is similar to a biological system, right? You can get to a further destination faster if there's an increased problem. So just like that, a lot of people are in sloth. We are in inertia. We're not drinking enough to be on the street bleeding or with the cops at our door, right? But we're not getting enough positives from the release that we can slowly then make it a healthy habit. So we're somewhere in between. So on that note, how do you speed up making addiction an actual problem, right? Humans, and this applies to relationships as well, are very receptive to what is called differential reinforcement, okay? Positive reinforcement and negative punishment. You remember this from learning in class.
Yeah, the Skinner's, B.F. Skinner did
B.F.
some
Skinner,
research. Yeah.
100%. And you remember, ring the bell, Pavlov's dog salivates. So positive reinforcement is when there's a good behavior, positive behavior, you reinforce it with positives, right? Your wife compliments you, you say something nice to your wife, you say, hey, honey, oh, you look great, right? You reinforce that circuit. Negative punishment is when something bad happens. Your punishment is you remove your positive, you take away your attention. The opposite is positive punishment. Someone does something mean, you criticize them. You're a piece of crap. You're this, whatever. Someone drinks, you're like, you're an idiot. I thought you said you'd stop drinking. That type of thing, right? And then negative reinforcement is you give them a negative stimulus, which is you nag your partner until they do something right. Then you stop the nagging, right? You'll be allowed to stay in the house if you do X, Y, Z. Then I'll be nice to you. That type of timeout thing. And they show that longer term change works with positive reinforcement, negative punishment. People get tempted by positive punishment, negative reinforcement, because it creates short-term change, right? If your kid's going to run into the street, you got to yell, stop, or it'll get hit by a car, right? So that makes sense. But for adults, think of your biological system, how you operate in the same terms, right? When you slowly, let's say you identify that I am an addict, I don't want to be drinking as much as I'm drinking, right? Don't want to watch porn as much as I'm watching it. When you do something one day, right? This is a long process. You're not going to change overnight. Let's say one day you drink a little less, okay? You should positively reinforce that. Reward yourself in a healthy way with something you wanted to do, right? And they've shown some people react more positively to positive reinforcement. Some people do better with negative reinforcement, right? Oh, you were going to go on a jog and go to your favorite concert? You don't get to go now, right? It's not a punishment. It's a removal of a positive. And these are some of the ways. We'll talk about this in a bit, but I wanted to know, go for it.
No, but this kind of either positive reinforcement or negative punishment, who meets these out? Is it a self-inflicted punishment routines or reward routines, or is there some counselor working side by side? is it in a clinical setting, or is
Right.
it possible to do at home?
So I'll say that a lot of people are afraid to seek help, like you said, right? You can start this process at home. This is very similar to doing a workout at home, starting a diet. Does it help to be able to talk about it with people? Does it help to go to a dietitian or a fitness specialist? Of course, but you can start today. So the primary methods right now, at least in the mental health community, that are targeted clinically to help patients who feel addiction, and this is even for chronic conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, etc.
Mm.
CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and
Yep.
DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, right? And DBT is a subset of CBT. What CBT does is it's focused on creating behavioral change. And they start with that with some of the things you mentioned, right? This reflection on when I had this negative thought, oh, I felt the impulse to drink. What was the thought? Let's write it down. Let's become aware of that, right? Where did that thought come from? Oh, God, my job sucks, right? That my boss doesn't respect me. Coworkers made fun of me. Okay, let's write that thought down. Let's see if there's validity to that, right? Does your boss hate you? Are you actually incompetent? Are you an idiot at work? Most people find out they're not, right? We all have this inner critical voice. Slowly through this process, journaling, tracking your behaviors with little wins. Like I said, some people respond better to positive reinforcement, some better with negative punishment. You slowly start to see change. Some people do a more extreme version where you lean into the negative thoughts, right? Replay that scary activity. Oh, my partner never thinks I'm enough, right? They think I'm a piece of crap, right? I can never make him happy. I can never make her happy. Lean into that thought over time. When you keep playing it, the monster starts to get smaller, right? Your almost overexposure can help change that. On the neurocircuitry side, a lot of people can't shake their habit. And this is where you can do some things physiologically. They've shown that if you want to reset your dopamine levels because you're just overindulgent with some of these addictive patterns, taking cold showers, getting away from technology, getting enough sleep, getting sunshine, music, all these things start to reset your dopamine. And it takes around 90 days to do this for most people, depending on the level of your addiction. But if you just can't get out of bed to do these things, this is too much process. You're like, oh, journaling, all this crap. No, I just want to drink, right? You can start with these small behaviors. It's going to be a small process where replace it with a smaller vice. Get ice cream if you didn't.
Are there apps that can help
Yeah.
people? People no longer keep journals in the old-fashioned way.
No, exactly. Yeah. So CBT is this primary method. They've shown that people who do CBT around 16 sessions or so, they start to see these real changes. DBT focuses more on this internal world, right? What is your trauma response? Is this because you grew up in a house where there was drinking? Did you feel neglected? XYZ, right? Some of the apps, there's Sanvelo is one of the best apps there. MindDoc, right? There's Bloom, there's Happify. All of these things you can download today to start this process, right?
Wow.
If you're having trouble getting out of bed, identifying this addiction, start with a small thing, right? Download the app, take a cold shower, start to reinforce this break. And of course, they also do say, yeah, if you have alcohol around your apartment, it's going to make it easier, right? Yeah. Don't expose yourself necessarily to the source, but be okay with the fact that we're all addicts, right? Yeah. What would you say when you try to frame this? How much of you do you think the interaction between psychology and physiology is? When you are in a bad mood, does it help to analyze where these things come from in your head and talk it out? Or sometimes do you just need to get a walk in the sun, right? Where's the balance between those two?
Well, I'm just beginning to understand the relationship between the two.
Okay.
It's tighter and tighter in my own personal behavior with my family and friends.
Yeah.
If there's a conflict, instead of going at it, I have learned that if you just walk away for a bit,
sure,
it helps to resolve the conflict later after some reflection and so forth. The same thing I found in dealing with some people who have admitted to me that they have some addiction problems is to engage with them on thinking about their perspectives of their lives.
Okay.
It's not intellectual as much as psychological.
Sure.
It's about reminding them they are always dwelling at the present moment, the misery of the moment, whatever pain they're feeling, or something that happened in the immediate past, or what they're afraid will happen tomorrow at a presentation they have to make. Sure. I remind them on perspectives in 3 dimensions. One is to really think about their whole life and say, does your whole life suck, or just you're in a bad spot now? And 90% of your life has been okay. 10%, sure. Sometimes you get into an issue. That's one way of getting a perspective. The second type of dimension is really think about all your peers, people at your uh, age level, socioeconomic level, and so forth.
Yeah.
Among that group, where do you rank? Are you at the bottom, or you're at the top, or somewhere in between? Most of us really are doing average.
Sure.
It's okay. So you don't have to be as miserable as you are feeling
Sure.
today. And the third dimension is really to think about globally. Generally in the world, there's a lot of problems with
Sure.
people dying of wars and diseases and so on. Most of us are really addicted to something or the other over less serious problems. We can deal with it, and building that confidence, I think, psychologically feeling good about beginning to feel again good about oneself when somebody is feeling not so good,
Sure.
and then building that confidence, I think, can complement with the things
Okay.
that you're talking about. With,
Okay.
all the biological things that happen in which cannot easily discern.
So I think that, this is maybe a contrarian take, but I think so much of mental health is driven by physical health. Yeah. I think if you have a great mindset and you don't have food, trust me, that mindset is going to break. Okay. So having just the core relationships, right? People to talk to, sunshine, a healthy diet, so much of mental health is just solved by that. And this is the concept from Atomic Habits, right? People who don't want to clean their room, massive thing, right? They say pick up one sock. The inertia that it takes to stop then picking up the sock right next to it, it takes more to stop than cleaning the next thing than to just keep cleaning, right? So setting off that little pattern, when in my business I focus a lot on men versus women, right? How our brains are different, right? Women, for example, their right side of their brain develops faster than men. Their corpus callosum is thicker, they have better memory, more lexical ability, etc. So these things you're talking about are kind of the global perspective, right? Have confidence, how do you rank amongst other people? I think that applies more for the masculine, right? When we are more competitive, we think about the external world, etc. For women, a lot of times they feel neglected, right? They feel uncherished, they feel invisible, etc. So for them, I think that starting with these baby steps, accepting that it's okay, right? It's okay that you're feeling this, right? Someone sees you for that. Someone can see you for that, right? I'm seeing that in you right now. So I think for women, the difference is this DBT technique, this dialectical, right?
Yeah.
Behavioral therapy is far more useful for them because there's a big component of mindfulness, a meditation in the sense of you sit there, you're observing your thoughts, but you're not being the thought, right?
Mm.
There's a big difference between being the emotion and observing you are a body that is having an emotional experience, right? You are not the emotion. So I think when women, and it works for men as well, but men who are more focused on the external, I got to stop drinking, I got to go to my job, etc. When women want to journal and they're focusing on their self-care, reflecting on, hey, was this a trauma bond from a past ex relationship? Was this from your childhood? Are you feeling neglected right now? Having this mindfulness is a form of self-soothing. And this can give the energy to then take that first step. Andrew Huberman talks about a lot of this in his biochemical research, that 11 minutes a week if you do a cold shower, right? So split it up amongst your showers.
Wow.
This itself can start to reset your dopamine levels, right? Cut out processed sugar. Processed sugar is like alcohol, right? Start doing little steps. For me, positive reinforcement doesn't work as much, right? People cheerleading me and stuff. I'm like, I don't care about that. I need discipline. So for me, I replace vices with a lesser vice, and it slowly weans me off. If I'm like, all right, if I'm not going to drink alcohol, I don't care if I'm going to this party. Okay, then maybe I'm going to get a little sugar at the end of the night, right?
Yeah.
It'll be a small portion, but it's a lesser of two evils, which is a net positive. So it can help. The same thing when you give your child a shot or something, right? If they're crying here and you pinch them on a different knee, it neutralizes that type of thing. So that works for me. I know different things work for different people, but I'm curious when you think about you going back to some of the people you've helped, right? How do you get into their world when people are going to be very insecure and guarded about this? What's a way for people who might have an addiction in their own life and how they would want to be approached, or people in their life who are addicted? How do you get them to open up? What do you say to them, right? Are they willing to talk about these things?
I find that they're willing to talk about it.
Okay.
If we don't talk about the addiction. Very often I've generally come across some people who are addicted. They don't tell me about it. Very often somebody, their friend or a family member, may tell me about it, but I don't talk to them about the addiction. I talk to them about other things in life. And I've generally found that some of these people have been to Alcoholics Anonymous. It seems to me, from all the things you're saying, it seems to me we have come a long way from Bill Wilson's 12 steps process in Alcoholics Anonymous. where
Yes.
you have to go to a group therapy,
Sure.
work with a sponsor.
Yep.
Those involve opening up, going to some place, meeting
Sure.
other people. That involves more vulnerability
Yeah. Agreed.
than working on yourself through this understanding of what this is. That it's not some kind of a incurable disease that we have. It's a
Yes.
condition that we have.
Yes.
And so I don't really talk about the addiction. I talk about their life.
That's a great point.
People talk to me, went to me about other things and so on. And something is what I found, that every 10 minutes that they're talking about something else,
Yeah.
they're not indulging in their addiction.
Yeah. All that helps too.
So that's important too.
So
So it seems to me that there's a whole new world is opening up,
Yeah.
both through the understanding of science,
yep.
of what's happening biologically, as well
Yes.
as the tools that are now available, that we can deal with this. This is not something that we need to really be either ashamed of, or as a society label ourselves as illegal, immoral. Those things are really not helpful.
We can get addicted to breaking the bad addiction. So
Yes.
if you guys are feeling these types of things, we are all experiencing in our own lives. We're all managing life together. Please reach out to us. But thanks for sharing in this topic, Dad.
Well done. Thanks.
Yeah.